Hi everyone, welcome to my video. My name is Rebecca and I am your insurance lady, and I have decided to post some videos with tips to help you prepare for the exam. I have received a lot of emails from folks asking for questions on how to pass the exam. And here's the thing, guys, there really are no shortcuts. You just have to know the policy. You have to know what's covered, what's excluded in order to be able to answer questions. Your state wants to make sure that you understand insurance before you can start to sell insurance, because you're going to be explaining this stuff to other people. So they want you to do what's in the best interest of the customer, which is another vocabulary word for fiduciary duty. And so the tests are not going to be easy, but if you know your material, then you should be able to pass the exam. So make sure you have at least the basics. Hopefully you have more than that, but if you have at least the basics and a basic understanding of the policies, then you should be good. So tip number one gives you an example of questions I pulled from an exam. It's probably not going to be on the exam, but it might be similar. And my goal here is to help you identify certain questions so that you can select the best answer. So just one question for today, and it's going to be on a personal auto policy, the liability section. All of the following are excluded on the liability section of a personal auto policy except A. Property damage to a garage rented to the insured. B. Property damage to property owned or being transported by the insured. C. Bodily injury to an employee of the insured during the course of employment. Or D. Bodily injury or property damage to others caused by an insured while engaged in the automobile business. So I'm going to give you guys a few moments here to answer this question on your own. You can pause it if you don't want me to give you the answer, if I'm going to give it to you too soon, and then just continue. Okay, so I'm ready to give you the answer. It is A, property damage to a garage rented to the insured. Yes. So for those of you who got this correct, great job. For those of you who didn't, don't worry, we're going to go over it, okay? So now let's go back to the question. All right, so all of the following are excluded. Hold on, okay. All of the following are excluded on the liability section of a personal auto policy except. The most important thing that you want to do here is identify what the question is asking you, okay? So we know that it's talking about the liability section of a personal auto policy. So you need to know what is covered under the liability section of an auto policy. And then that question is actually asking, it's asking what's not excluded. So all of the following are excluded on a liability section of a personal auto policy except. So you have to be careful of that tricky. It's kind of giving you this type of question where it's trying to trick your mind to think that they're asking for a different type of answer. But if it says all of the following are excluded, that means there are 3 answers that are excluded and there's 1 answer that's not. And you can only answer 1 answer, right? So usually if there's 3 that are the same, that 1 is the answer. So you're looking for something that's not excluded. That means you have to know what's excluded on the personal auto policy, the liability section. So let's go over that. So here are your exclusions. You have your personal property in transit. That is not covered on the liability section of an auto policy. Injury to your employees will not be covered. Auto business. If you are operating an auto business, your liability under your personal auto policy will not cover any of your damages. Commercial use. If you're using your vehicle for commercial use, damages are not going to be covered under a personal auto policy. Intentional acts. That one's easy because if you intentionally run over your ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend, your liability insurance is not going to cover it, so don't do it. Someone using a vehicle without permission is not covered under your liability section of your personal auto policy. Taxi or livery services are not covered. Basically, transporting people for a fee is not going to be covered under your personal auto policy. A non-owned vehicle that is used on a regular basis is not covered. So if you have liability insurance on your vehicle, just to explain that one a little bit more. If you have liability insurance on your vehicle and you have somebody who maybe your best friend decides that you're letting them use that vehicle Monday through Friday to go to classes for 2 hours, they're using it on a regular basis, right? If they are driving your vehicle and they get into an accident and your insurance company catches wind that they were using it on a regular basis, but they were not covered under your policy, nor did they have their own policy or their own liability insurance, that is an exclusion. A non-owned vehicle that is used on a regular basis is not, there's no coverage under liability. So let's go back up to the question here. So all of the following are excluded on a liability section of a personal auto policy except. So let's look at answer number A. Property damage to a garage rented to the insured. So usually when I'm tutoring, a lot of the people that I'm tutoring like to get this question wrong, and that's why I selected it. But if the reason why part A is the answer is because liability coverage will pay for any damages that you cause, any property that you damage to other people's property, to other people, right? So if you're renting somebody else's garage, yes, you're renting it, but it's not yours, it's somebody else's garage. So liability will cover somebody else's garage because it's not yours. You're liable for those damages and liability will cover it. So property damage to a garage that's rented, which is the key word, to the insured, is covered under a liability policy. Personal auto. Now, let's look at answer number B. Property damage to property owned or being transported by the insured. Well, let's look at your exclusions. If you look up at the top, personal property in transit is personal property and it's not covered. So property that's being transported by the insured is not covered on a liability policy. Let's look at answer number C. Bodily injury to an employee of the insured during the course of employment. So let's look at the exclusions. Injury to your employees are excluded. So just think of this. If you're running a business and you've got employees, there has to be a workman's comp that covers those employees' injuries, not your personal auto policy. So that's why. Okay, let's look at D. Bodily injury or property damage to others caused by uninsured. Here's the tricky one. Most of you probably answered this to be correct because we have a tendency to skim through reading. But when you're taking your test, you want to try to read everything because if you skimmed through the reading here, you would have selected D. Bodily injury and property damage to others caused by the insured. Well, yeah, your liability will pay for bodily injury and property damage to others caused by the insured, but not while engaged in an automobile business. Let's look at the exclusions. Automobile business, that's excluded. So hopefully that helps you with this question and why A is the answer. So you just want to be careful when answering those all are except questions. You want to pay close attention, and sometimes it helps me if I rephrase that question so that I can understand it better. So for example, if I get an all are true except question, I think to myself, okay, that means that there are 3 there are three answers in this question that are true, and there's one that is not true. And the one that I need to find out is which one's not true. So I know that's long, but sometimes that helps. So all are false except there are three answers that are not true. There are three answers that are false except one that is true. So I need to find that one. All are excluded except, and this one gets tricky because in a policy, sometimes something's not covered, but it might not be excluded either. So you want to make sure that you know your exclusions for policies. You got to know your liability exclusions. You got to know your homeowner's exclusions. You have to know your exclusions in order to answer this type of question correct. All are excluded except. So I'm looking for the coverage that's not excluded, because sometimes you can have all four answers where it's not covered, but only three are excluded. So be careful with that one. If you know your exclusions, you'll be able to answer that question correctly. And then all are covered except. So that means that there are three answers that are covered, and there's one that's not covered. The one that you want is the one that's not covered because you only can answer with one answer, right? Okay, so I hope this helped you guys. If you have any questions regarding this video, just email me. I'm trying to get better at answering right away or as soon as I see it. So I know sometimes it takes me a day or two, but I'll try to get better at checking my emails often, probably daily, so that I can respond to you guys faster. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. Again, my name is Rebecca and I am your insurance lady.